Welcome to Anderson and Bobak's Chat Tuesday. We got something up to talk about today, educational issues, the stay-at-home order, the e-learning, how does it affect parenting time? What's going on, girls?
Well, the Wall Street Journal had an interesting article today. Did you see it about some are just opting to close altogether because it's just too much trouble to e-learn at home. I'm glad I don't have to do that.
Whose trouble? Is it too much trouble for the teachers? Is it too much trouble for the parents? Is it causing problems for the kids? What's the trouble?
Seems to be a lot of things.
All of the above.
I'm just glad that I don't have to teach any kids at school at home. Whoa.
Well, it's got to be a really tough situation when you're working from home, you're teaching your kids from home, your spouse is working from home potentially. There's a lot going on. So what do they do if they cancel e-learning?
Well, they're just ending it early, according to the Wall Street Journal. So they're just calling an end to the school year, and I guess they'll have to make it up, later. So
that kind of gears into one of the questions that we had that we wanted to discuss today. How is that going to impact the summer parenting time schedule if e-learning just stops early?
Right, because normally the summer schedule starts like a week after school lets out. So if school is letting out now, does the schedule start now? Right. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about that over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And also I've heard, maybe I'd like to hear your thoughts on this substantial change in circumstances. So if you have a child that's e-learning at home, both parties are likely working from home and they want to switch the schedule so they can both participate in the e-learning. So what do you think? Do you think that's a substantial change in circumstances to modify the parenting agreement?
I would think so. But by the time you get it litigated, the summer will be over.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good thing now is our judges in Cook County have worked very hard to put in place the ability to get into court and get some of these things resolved. And there's also the mediators out there. There's some mediators that are working really hard to help people resolve things. But yeah, that may be a substantial change worth thinking about.
It's a rabbit hole, and I think a lot of it depends on how long this goes on for. Because I know some people are discussing the possibility of starting the school year in the fall with e-learning, and that, potentially the schools wouldn't open until winter. And I would think in situations where both parents are able and, it's safe, that they would want to share the burden of that, especially if they're both working. And it's interesting because, as Kim said, by the time you litigate it, summer's over. Well, are we e-learning in the fall? There's a lot of unknowns there.
I've heard in Lake County that they aren't going to go back to school until the new year. So wow. It's going to be really hard.
There's a lot of e-learning going to take place. So hopefully the parents can figure out, or at least get some guidance of how we got to handle it, because I think you're right. It may last a long time. What about the situation where school continues and the parents want to share, though, in that burden of e-learning? Do you think it's a responsibility of one parent? Do you think one parent should really be in charge so that the work gets done?
Well, it kind of depends on if someone's working or not. If you've got two working parents, I would think you'd have to, give up some of the time because you need to get your own work done. But what about the situations where you've got the other parent is not working at all, because they're a bartender, they're working in a restaurant, they're a chef, whatever, in that situation, that person isn't going to work. So, could you break up the day and that person be in charge of the e-learning during the day, and then when they're out of school, then the parenting time would convert back? It's one example of something people could try. Haven't you had a case like that, Jessica?
I haven't really had a situation where people are trying to figure out how to split the e-learning. But I was talking to someone today that indicated their stepchild's coming over once a week, and that it's a welcome break for the other parent because they're so sick of doing the e-learning that by the time the child gets to their house, they're not sick of doing it, so they're ready and willing. But I think a lot of people, there's this fear of how is this going to impact me later if I agree to change the schedule. And I think everyone kind of just has to do the best they can right now. I can't imagine a lot of things being held against them later if they make changes, hopefully the situation is just temporary. We'll move on from it, and you do what you do to get by.
I'm curious, like, what are people doing for like high school kids? Because I don't know about you, but I've seen what some of the high school kids are learning, and it's like college material. I mean, how do you even help them with that kind of stuff? I mean, I guess you could get e-tutoring.
There's actually an app. I might have mentioned this last week. I don't remember, but there's an app that you can check your math. Like, you can take a picture of your child's math homework and it'll check it for you. Because once my kids get to like 8th grade, I can't help them anymore. I'm
telling you, you don't have to wait till the 8th grade. Look at the third grade math. Like, what are they doing with those weird boxes?
Right, the Common Core curriculum.
Well, math may not be our strong suit, but let's talk about summer camps. What happens if summer camps don't proceed as normal?
They're not going forward. Summer camps are not going forward.
So you have the summer camp issue, which usually takes up some of the time. What about vacations? Everybody's got vacations planned. What do we do with that time? If you have a vacation planned, or if you have vacation time, I mean, how are we going to advise our clients who call and say, I got a vacation planned, or I don't have a vacation planned and I want to plan a vacation, and people still may want to travel. Then what happens?
Yeah, I did have that case, and it was litigated at the Cook County Court. And the judge weighed in on it, even though the issue was over with by then. But if you have a vacation, you're allocated that time, so if you go somewhere, to some cabin in the woods, I guess you could go do that. But, we treat parents to the degree that under the law that they take their child's best interest at heart. So if they're going to travel, I don't see that there's necessarily a problem with it. Depends on the circumstances of each and every case. But the judge that we had on that case that was litigated definitely said that the parenting schedule is going forward, and that's part of your summer time. So you're going to have summer time. Yeah. You're just probably not going anywhere.
And if you can't travel, I mean, I don't think there's any judge that is going to say you have to take a vacation to get to see your kid over the summer. They're going to, you can't go anywhere, They're not going to take that time away just because you can't travel. But I'm sure that question will come up. I'm sure we'll see motions about it, that it's a vacation, it's not parenting time. And people will make that argument.
What about if you have only the summer? You live in another state and your time with your child is just summertime. So does that go into effect now because the kids are out of school? How does that work, do you think?
Who knows? No, I mean, nobody knows these answers, So it's going to be something that's going to be something you look at, and try and negotiate with the other parent. Do you see that we have some questions? It says, what do you do if children are in paid daycare or private school? If the schools continue to charge money for school being out, who's responsible for this? Yeah, that is a good question for private school. I would guess you would just follow your agreement, though. If your agreement says you split the cost of private school and the private school's still charging you, what choice do you have? I mean, you're just going to have to pay it.
I have that issue with the college education expenses. Nobody's in college. They're still, am I supposed to pay for the menu plan? Am I still supposed to pay for rent? What are the expenses now? So all kinds of issues are coming up when you have an order to pay certain expenses. So not only with daycare, but you have the other perspective, which is college.
Yeah. Well, you'd think that you would just eat the cost proportionately to what you're ordered to pay if you're being forced to eat some of the cost, even though it's not in session. If there's I know with some schools, like private preschools and that sort of thing, they're reducing the tuition every month, same with daycares, or you're paying a prorated amount. And I think I would advise my clients to pay based on what their percentage typically is.
Yeah, and here's another question. If you hire a tutor or back up in-home childcare for your parenting time, who has to pay for it? And with that stimulus that just came out, the $500, a good friend of mine suggested this, and I thought, God, why didn't I think of that? But instead of fighting about who gets the $500, use it for the child. So if you're the parent that's got that $500, you could use it for certain things like starting to pay for the tutor, to pay for whatever it is that the child needs. But hopefully you guys can get together and arrange something that's applicable and works for both of you, because it would be a shame to see the kids start failing because you can't teach third grade math in the right way that you're supposed to teach it, It's like,
but I think
forget
that's
about high school.
I think that's a good point. I think if a judge was to think about it, I think, Kim, what you're saying is probably a pretty accurate representation. The $500 as part of the stimulus is for the benefit of the kid. So yeah,
Right.
there's some expenses that are coming out of this situation because of the kids. That's a really good solution. A really good
Yeah.
solution.
So why fight for it? I mean, we work, obviously by the hour. And so by the time we put a petition together and there's a hearing in front of the judge, I mean, your whole $500 is gone. So that doesn't seem like a smart way to spend your money. And you're only getting the money because you have the child. So let's, just dedicate it towards whatever expense this child is going through. I think tutors will be a big business right now.
Yeah, I think tutor, anything that can be done like this. There's a very interesting question that was just posed, and it's graduation was supposed to take place for high school kids in the next couple of weeks. So if they don't graduate till December, or maybe they can't walk till October or November, or maybe they never do, does that extend child support? That's a very interesting question. I know what I think about that. What do you think about that, Jessica?
No.
Well, I think that if school is still in session, even
But they
if it's not,
graduated.
well, I mean, the graduations, are we talking about the ceremony? Because if it's just that there's no ceremony, I don't know.
School's over.
Yeah, school's over.
Yeah. So if school's over, I agree. There's no extension of child support because your child can't walk across the stage, or because it's been postponed for a while. Yeah. But I
didn't attend my college graduation, and that doesn't mean I didn't graduate from college, Yeah. So, and they're doing like some Zoom. It's interesting what they're doing with Zoom now, but they're doing Zoom graduations where the kids walking across to get the, diploma. But yeah, it's some of this is going to be common sense too. Right. I mean, if that child graduated, I would say that that's over.
Yeah, graduated, finished high school. That doesn't necessarily mean a ceremony, but it means you're finished with your high school education. I think that would trigger the termination of support if they're already 18 years of age. And then the other issue we would start talking about would be college. So are you going to go away to college? Are you going to be e-learning in college? The expenses are going to be up in the air. So that's something that we're going to be dealing with this summer when we have these college petitions.
Yeah, and here's a question. How does the school schedule affect summer visitation for out-of-state non-custodial parents? And again, I think it's the same thing. You've got to follow the court order, the schedule, and try to do what's in the child's best interest as far as getting there. I think it's still going to be applicable. Everybody's schedule is still in place unless you file a motion with the court, and the court says, we're not going to follow. You had that case, didn't you, Jessica, where somebody didn't have to follow it, but it was per court order because the dad was doing something not right.
I think the case that you're referring to wasn't necessarily related to the coronavirus stuff, but the judges will modify the time if it's in the best interests of the children. Because as we had mentioned, you can get into court virtually, especially in Cook County right now. You can file motions, you can try to clarify, the schedule if there's some concern, or if there's a concern about transportation. I know Janet mentioned using a mediator. But if it's doable within, reasonable common sense and limits, there's no reason not to go forward. But you have to think about a lot of things, if you're driving, you're going to be stopping at rest stops and all that kind of stuff, and the exposure.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, because I've heard that the air on the airplane is being filtered, I don't know how many times to make it almost as sterile as I've heard them say on the radio, like operating room. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know. But it was interesting because I just flew, a couple weeks ago, and I had 12 people on the plane. And, if there was nobody in the front of me, there was nobody behind me, even in the next row across there was nobody there. So they had spaced us out quite a bit. And I didn't feel unsafe in the slightest. Everybody took really good precautions. Nobody at the airport. So I don't know. I don't know if necessarily flying would be not allowed. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's some people that have been quarantining like in the state of Illinois because they were here when this started, because it kind of started around some spring breaks. They have to go home. They can't stay here forever. At some point, they've got to leave. And so I've had questions about, is it safe to fly? What do I do? It's like, I mean, you can't be stuck here forever.
Right.
So, travel will become necessary at some point for some people.
You can ask Dr. Fauci or Brad Pitt.
Right.
Right?
Wasn't that awesome?
Right.
That was really good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed
Find
that.
Dr.
That was
Fauci.
fantastic.
Has he I haven't been watching the briefings. Has Dr. Fauci returned to the briefings? Is he still missing?
I don't know today. I haven't seen anything today,
Yeah.
but
When he asked, who would play him, and then he said Brad Pitt, and then Brad Pitt got on. I mean, it was so funny.
That was funny.
Really, really funny.
In case anybody doesn't know what we're talking about Saturday Night Live. They are
What are we
still
talking
going
about?
live from their homes. It is super entertaining, especially Weekend Update. Plugging Saturday Night Live now. But yeah, and so I don't think we mentioned this, but I'm sure everybody knows by now that the Illinois stay-at-home order has been extended through about Memorial Day, right?
The end of May, right?
Yeah.
yeah, Memorial Day is not the end of May. I think there's several days after that, but I think it's May 30th, which is almost a week after Memorial Day.
May 30th. Yeah. So
And it was
Yeah,
interesting downstate that somebody brought an action against being forced, and he won. And so we'll see if that is overturned by a reviewing court or not. But it only applies to that one person, so
right.
not sure how that's all going to work out either.
See how quickly it's overturned by a reviewing court.
Right.
Right, and if it's not, can you imagine the line of people at the courthouse?
I
Yeah.
know.
Which is exactly what we're trying to avoid, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I guess as long as everyone, and I know we wouldn't even be in business if everyone used their common sense, but they've got to put some sort of thought into what's reasonable in light of the circumstances with these situations, because we've never been through this before. So we don't really have any concrete answers. We can only, look at what would be in each person's individual case, what is something that's going to be in that child's best interest to go forward with this e-learning and staying at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think everybody's been doing a really good job of that. And Judge Dickler hasn't mentioned when the courts are reopening. Right now, we have an order that they're reopening on the 18th. That hasn't changed. I anticipate hearing something quickly as May 18th approaches, but we're proceeding as normal.
Yeah, and then there's a question here, Jan, about your college petition. She says it's not COVID-19 related, but I'd like to hear more about the college petition that Jan mentioned. I'm not
How
sure.
hard is it to get the judge to remove the required health care and increase the required health care and increase the child support? Well, if it's college that someone's looking for, it's not child support. It could be support based on a child that's over the age of 18, but it's not child support anymore. It's calculated a little bit differently, but you can get expenses related to your child going to college. And if they live with you, it could be expenses related to your home, transportation, health care, books, tuition, all that's included. In the courts, the law of Illinois does provide for college to be paid by the other parent or contribution of both parents if the parents are not together.
It kind of sounds like a different question, though.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, it looks like this person wants the required health care removed because it's typically a deduction, in the party's income, and that would increase the child support.
Well, child support is calculated differently. You don't use the same calculator when you're calculating support for your child that's over the age of 18. So it's not the same calculator.
Okay.
So here's another follow-up on the child support ending question. Does something have to be filed with the courts if my order of support states June 1st, 2020? So I think the question is, if there's actually an end date in the order, would they have to file something?
And there's only one child or more?
I don't know.
Yeah, if there's only one child, then they should be able to just terminate on June 1st, 2020 without having to file. But I'm always a little paranoid with that. And I usually like an order that says the support terminated, even if it says it. But what do you think, Jan?
I think if there's a court order, uniform order support is an order, and if there's a termination date on it, that's your order. That's what I think. I think if you got an order that says the child support terminates June 1st, 2020, then it terminates June 1st, 2020. Now, if it's automatically withheld from an employer, by an employer, they may want a separate order. I think that's enough of an order, but you may need another one.
Here's a question. If this stay-at order continues through fall 2020 and we are able to continue remote learning, how do we enforce the other parent to participate? Yeah, it's a hard one. We always had a list of things that needs to be done, in your child's folder. Somebody has to check that folder to make sure everything is being done. So I guess that's one way to hold somebody accountable, is just you have a list, or you meet with the teacher every day to see what needed to be done, and I guess, did it get accomplished? That would be how you would do it, I would assume. Otherwise, they mark you absent, don't they, if you're not logged in and participating?
Yeah, I guess that's the procedure. But I mean, I would think that if one parent is not going to buckle down and do it, unfortunately, you should be picking up the slack on it, because you don't want your kid to fall behind because your ex is being, ridiculous about it. And if you have to pick up the extra work to make sure that it gets done, I mean, that's going to be what's best for your kid. I don't know that you can make somebody do it, just like you can't make somebody exercise their parenting time, but it's got to get done one way or another. And it's unfortunate that the burden would fall on one person.
Yeah,
I don't know that.
This woman is saying, my ex does not believe that e-learning is well done, whatever that means, and that our daughter is smarter than that. Basically, he doesn't think she should complete it. I don't think it's up for him to decide it. If the teacher says it needs to be completed and he won't complete it, then I would think a petition would be filed with the court to say, look, he doesn't think the child needs it, he won't do it, this is what the school is recommending that he do, and then ask not to have parenting time for the dad, if he's not going to participate in something that's clearly mandatory for the child.
Yeah, I think it's in the child's best interest for both parties to participate, and if a court to be made aware that one of the parents is not logging in because they believe it's a sham, I think the courts would come down pretty hard on that.
Yeah. What could be more important than their education?
Right. Yeah,
So,
he has enough time where it's going to impact, if he is more than just like Saturday night overnight, then maybe reducing his time is the answer.
Yeah, I would assume that would be the courts. Okay.
Great chat, Katie.
Wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for participating. I'm glad that our technical difficulties worked a little bit better this time. And it was good seeing you. Yeah.
Third time's a charm. Call us at Anderson and Bobick if there's something we can help you with. We look forward to seeing you in person very, very shortly. Not sure when, but I'm sure soon. Stay well, stay healthy, and be safe.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.